Did I still remember the day Saad was born? The room was pale with soft morning light, and the smell of antiseptic lingered in the air, sharp and clinical. Yet all I noticed was him, my tiny son, swaddled and warm in my arms. His first cry was a jagged, fragile sound that somehow carried the weight of the whole world. I held him close, feeling the thrum of his heartbeat against mine, and I made a silent promise. I would live for him, love for him, and protect him with everything I had. From the beginning, he was careful, gentle, and despite everything, there were moments of unbroken warmth. A shared joke during breakfast, a sudden playful nudge from Saad, the way Sanaa would bring me tea in the evenings, smiling shyly. These moments reminded me that love existed, even if its shape was changing. But the undercurrent of something shifting was always there, quiet, persistent, waiting for me to notice it fully. The first few months of Saad and Sanaa's married life were, at least on the surface, full of promise and joy. I watched them with that careful, almost protective love that a mother carries, remembering the boy I had raised and marveling at the man he had become. I tried to imagine our little home as a stage where three people could share laughter, love, and companionship, but slowly, I began to notice that it was a rainy afternoon when I felt the first real pang of loneliness. I had been preparing lunch while listening to the gentle patter of rain on the windows. Saad was upstairs, likely on a work call, and Sanaa was curled on the sofa with a book, completely absorbed. I carried the tray to the table, setting it down quietly. "Lunch is ready," I said softly, expecting a smile, a word, a glance. Sanaa looked up briefly, nodded, and went back to her book. Saad didn't come down immediately. I sat down alone, staring at the plate of food, and felt the weight of something I had been ignoring, the truth that I was becoming an observer, rather than a participant, in their lives. Despite the growing distance, there were moments that reminded me why love endures, even when it changes shape. A shared joke at the table, a small hand resting on mine, a whispered "thank you" for a cup of tea. All of these were fleeting, yet precious. But the intimacy that had once welcomed me in, that had allowed me to feel part of their happiness, had begun to shrink, retreating like a tide. I noticed it in small gestures first. The way Saad would glance at his phone mid-conversation, smiling briefly at a message, and then return to me with the same polite, automatic smile he wore when a stranger complimented him. The way Sanaa would brush past me when we entered the kitchen together, placing herself slightly between us, as if to create a boundary that wasn't there before. I told myself not to overthink it. "They are busy," I murmured. "They are adjusting. Life is different now." But the pangs of absence in my chest did not fade. I noticed her distance too, though I couldn't tell her why. Every small smile she offered seemed carefully measured, as though she feared I might see the truth behind it, the truth that I had unknowingly. Sanaa noticed the tension in my expression. Later, in the car, she reached for my hand. "Auntie, I hope I'm not making this harder. I just want you to feel part of things." I squeezed her hand gently. "You're not making anything harder, Beta. You're trying, and that is enough," I whispered. But inside, the quiet pang remained, the subtle knowledge that the balance had shifted permanently. As weeks passed, my role in the household continued to change. I found myself sitting quietly during meals, pouring tea without speaking, observing their small world from the edge. The bubble of intimacy between Saad and Sanaa was warm, loving, and natural, but I was not part of it. Sometimes, I would attempt to join them in conversation, only to be met with polite nods or short responses. My words felt heavy in the air, weighed down by unspoken distance. I began to accept it quietly, acknowledging that the role I had played for so many years was evolving into something different. And yet, even in that acceptance, I felt a deep ache, the awareness that love does not always guarantee presence in someone else's life, that joy can exist in ways that do not include us. I began to notice the withdrawal, to feel it in my bones. I loved Saad, yes, but I could see the quiet ache in his mother's eyes. I had not meant to exclude her, but the intimacy of our marriage, the rhythm of our shared life, had formed a subtle barrier I could not entirely break. I wanted to reach out, to include her in our small moments, but I feared overstepping. Every gesture felt tentative, careful, weighted with the possibility of making her feel uncomfortable. I loved her, truly, and yet, in my desire to love her properly, I realized that some distance had already formed, and there was no simple way to erase it. It hit me slowly, painfully, like a wave I could not stop. I had been so focused on balancing work, marriage, and household responsibilities that I had neglected to see the subtle erosion of my mother's role. I had assumed she was fine, that everything was as it had always been. But the sighs, the quiet smiles, the polite gestures, they were all signs. And in that, gestures that I was no longer part of. I had tried to convince myself that this was natural, that love changes, that space is necessary. And yet, sitting there alone, I could no longer ignore the truth. I was not at the center of their world. I was a guest. I noticed it too, though I didn't know how to address it. I had always tried to include her, asking her opinion, inviting her to help with meals, sharing small chores that might make her feel valued. But every time, I saw a hesitation in her movements, a soft sigh, a quiet withdrawal that told me my gestures were only partially bridging the gap. I wanted her to feel comfortable, to know she was loved, but I had come to realize that no gesture could undo months of subtle distance. I felt a twinge of guilt each time I caught her watching us from across the room, smiling politely but with a quiet sadness that seemed to hover over her like an unspoken shadow. I didn't understand at first. I thought everything was fine. Our marriage, my care for my mother, our shared household routines. But the signs were there, the quiet sighs, the polite nods, the way she would linger on the edges of our conversations, her hands busy with small tasks she didn't need to perform. It wasn't until one evening, when I found her sitting in the dim light of the living room, staring at the rain sliding down the window pane, that the truth hit me. The ache in her eyes, the heaviness in her posture, it was the result of my neglect, my unintentional retreat into a life shared primarily with Sanaa. I loved them both, yes, but in trying to nurture one relationship, I had allowed the other to drift quietly to the side. That night, I allowed myself to fully feel what had been simmering beneath the surface. I was not angry, nor resentful. I was simply absent. I had given so much of my life to my son, nurtured him, guided him, protected him, only to realize that my role had quietly shifted. The realization was not dramatic. There were no raised voices, no tears cried across tables. Just a quiet, almost imperceptible ache, a soft understanding that my place in this household had changed. I was a witness now, not the heart, a guest now, not the center. I replayed memories in my mind, the birthdays I had organized, the meals I had prepared, the countless small gestures that had once anchored my place in their lives. And slowly, with each memory, the truth became clear. Love alone does not guarantee presence. The next morning, Sanaa approached me cautiously. She had noticed the quiet withdrawal, the small signs I had tried to hide. "Auntie," she said softly, hands folded nervously, I feel like I haven't done enough to make you feel part of this house. I want you to know you're important to us." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, and smiled gently. "You are trying, Beta, and that is enough. It's not about effort, it's about understanding that my place has shifted. I am a guest now, and that's okay." Her eyes widened slightly, a mixture of relief and guilt. She reached out, lightly touching my hand, a gesture of connection. "I never wanted you to feel like a guest," she whispered. I nodded, the words soft but firm. "I know. But love changes shape, and our roles evolve. That does not mean love is gone." I watched them, feeling a pang of guilt and urgency. I had been so focused on balancing work, marriage, and daily responsibilities that I hadn't noticed the quiet erosion of my mother's presence. That night, I went to the living room, hesitating before speaking. "Mom, I didn't realize," I said slowly. "I didn't see how much I'd changed things. I love you. I've always loved you. And I didn't mean to make you feel invisible." She looked at me, calm, composed, and yet carrying the weight of months of unspoken emotion. "I know, Saad. It's not about love," she replied softly. "It's about space and understanding. I've realized my place has changed. I am a guest now, and that is okay." I swallowed hard. Emotions thick in my throat. I want to make it right. Not to change the past, but to be more present. Her smile was soft, almost serene. "Presence is enough, Beta. Nothing more is required." That evening, I wandered through the house, touching objects, recalling small moments, Saad as a child falling in the garden, his tiny hands clutching mine. The first day I met Sanaa, her shy smile, her careful gestures. I realized that love, even when reshaped, still connects us. The center may shift, but the bonds remain. Sanaa joined me in the kitchen, quietly arranging dishes. We didn't speak much, but there was a gentle rhythm, a mutual understanding. She was part of their world, yes, but she acknowledged me as well. There was peace in that quiet coexistence, a fragile but growing harmony. Over the next few days, subtle changes emerged. Saad began noticing my small gestures, pouring tea, tidying the table, arranging the chairs. He would offer a small word of thanks, a brief smile, a glance that carried recognition. It wasn't dramatic, but it mattered. Sanaa invited me to join her in cooking, asking my opinion on recipes, laughing softly when I teased her for over-seasoning the curry. Those small interactions slowly rebuilt a sense of connection. I no longer demanded the center of attention. I was content to exist alongside them, to participate quietly, to witness their happiness without needing to inhabit it fully. I realized something profound. Being a guest does not mean being unwelcome. It means understanding that life can contain overlapping circles of love, each valid and complete in its own way. I could witness their happiness, share it in my own capacity, and still feel fulfilled. Sanaa's presence, once a source of subtle tension, became a bridge rather than a barrier. Her kindness, her respect, her careful gestures reminded me that love is not finite. It multiplies in many forms. And Saad, slowly, began to see the quiet sacrifices, the unseen efforts, the small, constant love that I had offered all my life. One evening, we sat together for dinner. The table was simple, yet warm. Bread, vegetables, a stew simmered with care. Saad and Sanaa sat across from me, our conversation light but genuine. I poured tea, smiling softly, and felt a subtle peace settle in the room. It was not the old dynamic, the mother at the center, the son constantly attentive, the daughter-in-law tentative, but it was something real, something sustainable. We had found a new rhythm, a balance that respected all of our spaces while maintaining love. I no longer needed to occupy the center of their lives. I was part of their circle, and that was enough. It happened quietly, without fanfare. I watched Saad and Sanaa laugh together over a small, private joke, their hands brushing briefly. I smiled, feeling a warmth that wasn't possessive, but generous. I understood fully that I was a guest in their happiness, not excluded, not unwanted, simply observing, participating where possible, loving without expectation. It was a strange freedom. No longer burdened by the need to hold the center, I could give my love freely, quietly, and without need for acknowledgement. That day became a turning point. I had accepted my place, and with that acceptance came a fragile, steady peace. The mornings had begun to feel different. Not in the way they used to when I was at the center of everything, orchestrating meals, conversations, and celebrations, but in a quieter, gentler way. I could sit with my tea, watching Saad and Sanaa move around the kitchen in their small rhythms, without the ache of exclusion. I had learned to observe without expectation, to participate without needing to lead, to love without needing acknowledgement. Life had taught me a subtle, delicate lesson. Love does not always need a center. Sometimes, it is enough to be part of a circle, to be present, to witness joy without dominating it. Sanaa was the first to notice the change in me. One morning, as I prepared breakfast, she appeared quietly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Auntie," she said softly, "I thought I'd make some coffee." Would you like me to? I smiled, appreciating the gesture, and nodded. Yes, Beta. That would be lovely. She poured the coffee carefully, setting the cups down, her hands brushing mine as she passed one over. There was no hesitation, no self-consciousness, just a simple act of shared presence. Saad came down soon after, yawning, rubbing his eyes, and offering me a tired but warm smile. Morning, Mom, he said, his voice carrying the soft rhythm of familiarity. Morning, Beta, I replied. We exchanged a glance, a quiet acknowledgement of the weeks we had passed, the distance that had formed, and the new understanding that had grown. We ate quietly, the house filled with the gentle sounds of utensils on plates, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and occasional laughter over a shared memory from yesterday. There was no need for forced conversation, no effort to fill silence. The presence itself was enough. I had been careful for months, trying to bridge the gap between myself and my mother-in-law without being intrusive. I wanted her to feel included, loved, respected, but I had also learned that some things could not be forced. Over the past weeks, I had started inviting her into small routines. Cooking together, preparing tea, chatting while folding laundry. Each task became a bridge, a shared space where we could coexist comfortably. One afternoon, as we chopped vegetables together, I asked softly, Auntie, what do you think about adding some spices to this curry? I'm not sure if it's enough. She smiled, adjusting the lid on the spice jar. It's already wonderful, Beta, but a pinch of this might bring it to life. We laughed quietly at our careful experimentation, a small shared triumph. I realized then that the tension of the past months had not vanished, but it had transformed into something gentler, mutual respect, understanding, and the fragile beginnings of harmony. I noticed the subtle changes too, though differently. I had been preoccupied for months with work, marriage, and the small daily responsibilities that had consumed me. But I had begun to pay attention, really notice my mother's presence, her small gestures, her quiet care. I started making an effort, not grand gestures, not dramatic apologies, but small, consistent acknowledgments. Pouring her tea first, asking for her opinion on small decisions, listening to her stories without distraction. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, I said softly, Mom, can you show me how you used to make this dish? I want to learn. Her eyes softened, a small smile playing on her lips. Of course, Beta. I'll show you. It was simple, almost mundane, but it carried with it months of understanding, reflection, and subtle reconciliation. Weekends had once been a test of inclusion. Grocery errands, trips, small tasks, each outing had highlighted my peripheral role in their lives. But over time, we had found a new rhythm. I accompanied them quietly, helping with the shopping, chatting with Sanaa as she discussed recipes, exchanging small jokes with Saad about brands and prices. No longer did I feel excluded. I participated where appropriate, observed where necessary, and allowed the dynamics of their marriage to exist without resentment. At the checkout, Saad held my bag, smiling briefly as we navigated the conveyor belt together. Sanaa glanced at me, her eyes bright with a small, shy warmth. For the first time in months, I felt fully included, not at the center but not excluded either. The evenings became a space of quiet connection. We would sit in the living room, Saad reading a book or checking emails on his laptop, Sanaa knitting or preparing something small, and I would sit with my thoughts or a cup of tea, occasionally interjecting a comment or story. One night, as rain pattered softly against the windows, I shared a story from Saad's childhood. Do you remember, Beta? I began, looking at Saad, how you used to ride your bike in the garden, falling repeatedly but always getting back up? He smiled, nodding. I remember, Mom. I used to think you were exaggerating about how many times I fell. Sanaa laughed softly. You were stubborn even then. Some things never change. I smiled at her, a quiet warmth spreading through me. She wasn't a barrier anymore. She was part of the bridge that allowed us all to connect. Meals became a symbol of our new dynamic. No longer did I prepare elaborate spreads hoping to command attention. Instead, we worked together, Saad setting the table, Sanaa arranging flowers, and I stirring the stew or chopping vegetables. One afternoon, as we ate lunch together, Saad said softly, "Mom, I'm glad we're doing this together. It feels right." I nodded, placing my hand lightly on his. "It is, Beta. It doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be shared." Sanaa reached across, gently touching my hand as well. "We're a team now," she said quietly. And I realized then that I had fully accepted my role, not at the center, but part of the whole. A guest, yes, but a welcome one, participating in love and life without needing to dominate it. The next family celebration, Saad's next birthday, was different. We planned it together, sharing responsibilities, laughing, and respecting each other's roles. I baked the cake, yes, but it wasn't a performance. Saad and Sanaa helped, suggesting decorations, frosting, and arrangements. As we lit the candles, I watched their faces, the joy in their eyes, the small, private interactions between them, and the occasional glance they gave me. I was not at the center, but I was there, fully included, fully present, fully part of their happiness. I felt a soft warmth in my chest. Love, I realized, did not need a throne. Presence, respect, and mutual care were enough. Sanaa had learned to navigate the balance. She no longer worried that her presence would exclude me. She understood that my love for Saad was vast, but it had evolved. She included me when appropriate, gave space when needed, and slowly, quietly, we had built a mutual understanding. I noticed the subtle signs of her comfort, the way she laughed without hesitation, the small gestures of warmth, the way she sought my advice or asked for my opinion. It was no longer awkward. It was natural, part of the rhythm of our shared life. I had grown too. I understood that love required attention, observation, and consistent care. I didn't need to mediate every interaction or control the dynamics. I simply needed to be present, to acknowledge, to participate. One night, as we sat together in the living room, I said softly, "Mom, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I'm grateful for everything you've done for me. For us. For this family." She smiled, eyes soft. "I know, Beta. You've grown into a man who understands love. That is all I could hope for." I realized finally that being a guest in someone's happiness does not mean being absent from it. It means loving without control, participating without dominance, observing without resentment. I could be fully present in their lives without needing to be the center of attention. The ache that had once haunted me, the quiet pangs of exclusion, had softened into a gentle understanding. I had a role, subtle yet vital. I had presence, influence, and love, not as a ruler of the household, but as a steady, quiet foundation. Evenings became our time for quiet reflection. Saad would read or work, Sanaa would prepare tea, and I would sit with my thoughts, occasionally sharing stories or jokes. Sometimes we spoke little, sometimes we laughed. But every night, there was a rhythm, a shared understanding that our love and care did not require perfection or centrality to remain meaningful. On one such evening, as the sun set softly behind the curtains, I watched them together and thought, "This is enough. I am a guest, yes, but a welcome one." And in that understanding, I found a peace deeper than any I had known. The day I realized I was a guest in their happiness was painful, yes, but it was also transformative. I learned that love evolves, that roles shift, and that presence and care are more important than control. I watched Saad and Sanaa, laughing quietly over a small, shared joke, their hands brushing together. I smiled, feeling warmth without desire, joy without ownership. I had discovered something profound. Love does not require a throne. It thrives in presence, respect, and mutual care. I was no longer at the center, but I was part of the circle, and that was enough. The house was filled with warmth, laughter, and small moments of connection. And as I sipped my tea quietly, watching the family I had nurtured and now shared, I felt a sense of peace I had never known. I was a guest in their happiness, but a welcome, cherished one. If you are feeling this story, hit subscribe, comment, and likes for more emotional life reflections.